Governor, we're going to jump in. I've got a full day and we won't keep you over your time. So I just wanted to start out. Your opponent had a press conference yesterday where he essentially pretty strongly said if he's elected, he's not going to raise taxes, and in fact, he's going to cut taxes. He said if people choose you instead, that you will definitely raise taxes. What's your response to that?
Well, Mr. Kasich says a lot of things that I disagree with, obviously. You know, long before I became a politician, I was a psychologist. And one of the most basic things we know from psychology is that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And so I've been a governor for 4 years. I've dealt with extremely difficult circumstances, and I have made very difficult decisions. I have reduced the state employee base by about 7%, representing almost 5,000 fewer employees. Now, Mr. Kasich, he's an interesting guy because he says, wait a minute, I believe that during a course of 4 years, a governor is likely to have about 9,000 people leave state government, and you've hired back 4,000. I said, well, John, that's still a reduction of 5,000, you know. And he says, I wouldn't have hired back any of them except essential personnel. Well, then you get into what's essential. But I've done what Mr. Kasich and others have only talked about doing. I've actually reduced the size of government, and I believe I've been able to continue to provide the most essential services to our people, even with a smaller workforce. I've also asked a sacrifice out of the state employees that remain. They've taken 10 unpaid furlough days each year for 2 years. They've gone without pay raises. I've cut my own pay. I have made difficult choices in that some of my agencies are operating with about 70% of what they have used or had available to them in prior budgets. I've gotten beaten up by many in the media for not raising taxes. Maybe you've read some of their editorials. I don't think any of you have editorialized against me in that way, but many of the major newspapers in Ohio have. So I think I've acted responsibly, and I think I've made tough decisions, and I think I have managed the affairs of this state responsibly during a very, very difficult period of time, economically. Going forward, I will continue to exercise the same kind of good judgment and priority setting that I have in the past 4 years. In terms of Mr. Kasich, I have no idea what he's going to do. In fact, I don't think anyone else does. I think he's talking irresponsibly. He says he doesn't want federal assistance. He says he's going to begin reducing the state income tax. He says he's going to immediately eliminate the estate tax. And he has signed a pledge that he will never support any increased revenue. And he says, at least his running mate says, that the deficit's going to be $8 billion. I don't know that it'll be $8 billion, but it's going to be a huge challenge. So I think he is acting in a fairly irresponsible manner. I think I've acted responsibly, and I think I've been a mature leader during these difficult times. And so I just think Mr. Kasich is flat out wrong. And I don't know how else to state it.
Is it realistic, I mean, if it is a $6 billion, $8 billion budget hole, is it realistic to think that that can be dealt with without some kind of tax or fee increase?
Well, I think it all depends on what happens. I will continue, as I have, to advocate for additional federal resources until the effects of this recession lift. I think that's reasonable. I don't think that's something that state, Ohio or any other state, should expect on an ongoing basis. But I think a lot of people who, who object to the support that the state and the states have received fail to recognize that what we've been dealing with is not a normal economic cycle. We have been dealing with unprecedented economic circumstances that are unique in at least 70 years. And I think under those circumstances, it is reasonable to expect federal assistance until the recession lifts. Otherwise, it will require massive reductions in state government, in a state government that I contend has already been significantly reduced. My first 2-year budget passed with only one dissenting vote, although both chambers were controlled by Republicans. It was the slowest growth budget in 42 years. So we didn't build a lot of fat into my first budget. In spite of that, before the end of that 2-year budget, I had to reduce spending in that budget by about $1.7 billion. And then when we constructed our current budget, we further reduced spending by an additional $1.9 billion. So the fat has been squeezed out of this budget. Now, is it possible to further cut? Absolutely, you can always cut more. Is it possible to cut while continuing to provide the services that the people of this state expect from their state government? I don't think so. And so ultimately it will be up to the people of Ohio to decide what kind of government services they want. But I believe the economy is recovering and that we will be back to a normal economic cycle. Now, why do I say that? The Federal Reserve out of Philadelphia said in the second quarter, Ohio had the 6th fastest growing economy in America. We have seen a ticking downward in our unemployment rate for 5 straight months. We now have a lower unemployment than the state of Indiana. John Kasich has brought Governor Mitch Daniels over here and held him up as the model of what a governor should be. And yet last month, Indiana's unemployment ticked up. Ours went down, below Indiana's. Columbus Dispatch did a story saying that on a per capita basis, Indiana has lost more jobs in the last, I think, 3 years than Ohio has. So I think we're on our way out of this recession. It's going to take us a while because the hole is very deep. But I think I have laid the foundation for future growth. And so we will be back to a more normal economic period, I hope sooner rather than later. And in the meantime, what I've tried to do is manage the affairs of this state so that we haven't been forced to raise taxes, and we have continued to provide the most essential services. We're not doing everything that the people of Ohio want me to do. Talked to some of my friends in the mental health community, for example. I came from the mental health community. I know how they feel. They feel as if they've needed more resources. And quite frankly, they have. But when you're the governor, and you're not just speaking theoretically, you've got to deal with real problems and make real decisions. And I've done that. And so, we are looking at further ways to reduce spending. Now let me, and I don't want to dominate the time here, but this is an important question you've asked. If you look at the state budget, you understand that the problem is really contained within 4 areas of spending. The Dispatch also did a story saying you could eliminate every state employee, every one, and you wouldn't solve what the deficit is projected to be. State government spends on higher education, K through 12 education, Medicaid, and our institutions, primarily our prisons, youth services, developmental centers, and so on. So this is what I've done. I've asked Knowledge Works the education group that's largely funded by the Gates Foundation, to look at our K through 12 system, scrub it, try to find efficiencies, ways to save money, and bring me their recommendations. They are in the process of doing that. I don't know what the recommendations may be, but they're telling me that they think they're going to be able to come to me with some recommendations that are going to be helpful. I've asked our chancellor to do the same thing with higher education. We've already done a lot with higher education in Ohio. When I became governor, we did not have a system of higher education. I created the university system of Ohio. Every institution had their own free-floating agenda out there. There was very little cooperation, no shared purchasing of energy or equipment or technologies or of expertise. We've started turning that around. I think there's greater cooperation now than ever before. And we are asking our institutions of higher education to find efficiencies. I said to them, we're going to try to give you additional state resources if you will give me cost savings and efficiencies in the way you do business. And I think that process is underway. Then we come to our prisons primarily. The Council of State Governments has an initiative where they will come into a state and scrub that state's prison operation, criminal justice operation. They'll only come in if the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the majority leader in the Senate, all three invite them to come in. We've done that. They are in the process of doing this evaluation right now. They will be bringing me suggestions regarding best practices and so on. I can tell you we have too many people in prison. It's costing us too much money. It's an irrational system we have in place. The average person that's incarcerated in our adult system, this costly adult system, the average length of stay is 9 months. And these people are coming in, many of them nonviolent, and they're staying for 9 months, and we're training them how to be a better criminal when they're in there, quite frankly, and then they're going back, and it's a revolving door. There are things that we can do to improve that, and I hope this analysis by the Governors Association will help us. And then finally, Medicaid. We have already saved over almost $1 billion, well over $800 million in Medicaid since I've been governor, simply by requiring third-party payers to meet their obligation. In other words, in the past, Medicaid had just paid for a lot of stuff that the private insurance and other payers should have paid, and we stopped that, and we've saved almost $1 billion. But I've gone to the Ohio Business Roundtable, you know that group, comprised of the major corporate leaders in our state. And I've asked them if they will assume the responsibility of analyzing, looking at our Medicaid program in an effort to advise me as to how that program can be better run, more efficiently, cost effectively. And the Ohio Business Roundtable is doing that. So these 4 broad areas of the state budget, I'm having, with the exception of higher education, we're doing that internally through the Chancellor's Office and the Board of Regents. I'm having external folks with access to expertise look at those systems and give me advice as to what we can do to do it better.
Governor, to follow up a little